I'm happy to see everyone here. When Christmas falls on Saturday, you wonder if anyone's going to show up on Sunday. Today's the feast of the Holy Family as well, because the first Sunday in the Christmas octave is to the family of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. But do not let anyone forget that Christmas lasts 8 days. So we have 6 more days of Christmas following today. So celebrate well. The Holy Family is so striking. I think what I'd like to just reflect on today is simply the silence of the Holy Family. That Jesus lived an ordinary life with Mary and Joseph for 30 years. 30 years he lived as a family, without preaching, without doing some ministry, no healings or big signs that we know of. 30 years. And it's crucial to note that Jesus was not wasting time. God doesn't waste time. So what was he doing? Let me share. There's a French man, Louis, who wanted to become a priest. And he, applies to the seminary and whatnot. And they said no. He was denied. So can you imagine, as a young man, feeling, I think God wants me to be a priest or discern this. And he does everything right, and he seems to have his life put together, but he's told no. And it was some scruple or something about his health or something about his academic abilities. Can you imagine just how discouraging that would be? What does God want from me? I thought he wanted this. Meanwhile, there's a young lady who wanted to be a nun. Same thing happens to her. She has that sense, I think this is what God wants from me. I'm excited about the challenge to be a nun. She applies and they say no. What do I do with my life? Her name was Zélie, and Louis eventually met Zélie, and they got married. So God had different things in store for them. But they are the parents of Saint Therese of Lisieux, and they were both canonized as a married couple in 2015. Again, because the church is trying to teach us the virtues of the Holy Family. That in ordinary life, family life, we're still made for heaven. You're not less called to be with God because you're not a priest or a nun. The church has never believed that. But their example is a great one to remind us of that. Jesus doesn't waste time. Jesus is modeling time well spent. So Jesus would have worked. Joseph was a carpenter. And he would have had, tasks, chores and things. Was that just wasting time? Was that just delaying because he was going to have more influence on people as a 30-year-old than as a 12-year-old? Or is God rather doing something that he's showing us that in ordinary task, there can be something invisible happening? I think of the rays of the sun. You don't see them, but they burn your skin. They help photosynthesis take place and plants to grow. You don't see those rays. You don't see lasers coming from the sun. But it's doing something. Very much so, ordinary tasks done for God can do some invisible things. So, invisibly, something amazing is happening. The ordinariness of the home of Zélie and Louis was evidenced particularly by the letters that that they exchanged between each other. So there's a book called A Call to Deeper Love This book contains 218 letters that Zélie sent to her husband. It also has the letters that her husband sent to her, which add up to all of 16, which I find hilarious. 218 letters, and he would write back very rarely when he was traveling or something, I don't know. But in those letters, Zélie, who's a saint, describes one note is she's talking about how insanely difficult the morning has been. She had 5 kids at the time, and she writes, "It's only noon, but if things continue this way, I'm going to be dead by evening." In another letter, she's talking about her, not having a babysitter in the morning, and she said, "I was alone with the kids all day. I can't do this any longer." So, ordinary life. In that struggle, something good is happening. God is He takes our feeble offerings, and He can do great things with little if it's given to Him. The family life of the Holy Family reminds us of the value of daily, regular prayer as a family, and the value of fasting. That's just another example of mundane activity that can generate spiritual power. Zélie writes in one of her letters, "I am suffering so much from the fasting and abstinence. It's not a very severe mortification, but I am so tired of how my stomach feels, and especially so cowardly, that I would not want to do it at all if I listened to my nature." First of all, it's kind of formal speech. She was in the 1800s, cut her a break. It's not how people talk these days. But it's funny, as Catholics we fast in abstinence, especially on Good Friday and Ash Wednesday, and they did the same. And that's a funny thing that the church teaches us, to remind us that it means nothing. You accomplish very little by giving up a meal. By worldly standards, saying prayers at night has done nothing. There's nothing you can measure. But every little thing done for God can accomplish big things, move hearts, unite us closer to the Lord. Zélie and Martin said that their aim was to raise their kids for heaven. See, when you have a direction, a specific goal in mind, it gives energy. Compare a lake or a swamp. You just have a body of water that's just sitting there. It can become stale, stagnant. It's just lazy. You get in a floaty and you're just going to sit there. Whereas if you create boundaries, and you now have a river that can have energy and verve, you put yourself on a floaty and you will fly down that river. Because when you have direction, you get energy, and that generates power. And that's what all of us are called to in our family life, in our ordinary day-to-day existence. If we give everything direction, it fills us with life. St. Francis de Sales has a wonderful book called The Introduction to the Devout Life. And he speaks of how bees, he gives the image of bees who fly about collecting pollen and things from different herbs and plants that would be very bitter to your taste. And you might imagine that the bees have to work hard to fly about and collect the pollen and the nectar and other things. But they bring that back and are able to produce great sweetness out of these bitter things. They create honey. And he uses that as an image that the soul that's devout, that practices devotion, prayers, fasting, just in doing everyday mundane things for God's glory, it can make what is bitter become very sweet. That's the example of the martyrs who were smiling and joyful and at peace as they were led to slaughter for their faith. But all these things, the Holy Family of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph today reminds us that the ordinary life matters and can take on infinite meaning when it's given the direction of heaven.